Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. We're going to, over the next several weeks and month, try to get through the Republican candidates for governor, and it's a crowded field. We may not get to everybody, but we're trying to get the top tier, what we believe is the top tier. And Doug Ducey's our guest this week on Newsmaker Sunday.
Thanks for having me.
State treasurer.
Yes.
Took that job, you began that job, what, in
2010.
Right, January of 2010. And before that, people know that you were kind of the magnate with Cold Stone Creamery and helped it wildly expand from one store, what, in Tempe was the first one?
I spent my adult life in the private sector, but Cold Stone Creamery was my company. I got on board very early, and we grew it to 1,440 stores all over the country, and it operates in 25 countries around the world today.
You got out why? When you sold it to another company?
We sold Cold Stone in 2007, and we had 1,440 stores operating in the United States and about 800 in the pipeline. And that was about the American market. We were just starting to expand internationally. I loved that part of the business, opened up the Japan market, the China, South Korea.
Did you travel and do all that?
Yes, yeah. But I had 3 young sons at home at the time, and it was the right time to sell the business.
Your kids are, let's see, Jack 17, Joe 15, Sam 10?
Yes, Jack just completed his junior year, Joe just completed his freshman year. Sam just completed his 4th grade year, and he still listens to me.
Now, the kids are not in public school.
They are at Catholic schools, yes.
They're at Catholic schools. Let me ask you about education, because this is going to be such a big topic. Are we funded appropriately for public education?
Well, I believe we've got a lot of money going through our budget. You know, in
Break
total,
it down, show us.
Sure. We've got $9 billion in total that we're spending on K-12 education.
This is federal?
This is federal, state, and local. And this is to educate just over 1 million K-12 school children. So what I'd like to do is focus, I mean, part of what animates me in this campaign, John, is not only kickstarting our economy and growing it, but part of economic development is a sound education program. And we've got some pockets of excellence in Arizona. I mean, we know how to educate a child here. We've got 3 of the top 10 high schools in the nation in the state of Arizona.
But they're charter schools.
2 of them are charter schools. One is a public K-12, University High in Tucson.
In Tucson, yeah, I know it well. I know it well. Right in the shadow of University of Arizona.
That's right. So what I want to talk is about outcomes in K-12 education and how we apply these best practices that we have not only going in charter schools, but also in public K-12 schools. We did a telephone town hall in our office with Dr. Chad Gaston, who's the principal of Camelback High School. Camelback was a once proud and performing Phoenix Union High School. It was at the bottom of Phoenix Union, I think 5 or 6 years ago. Enter Chad Gaston, who's a Teach for America graduate and was also a principal at Carl T. Smith School at 37th Avenue, south of I-10, and he's turning the school around because he's focusing on high expectations, he's focusing on teachers getting the support they need inside the classroom from him, and he's building a cultural model where kids are not students, they're scholars. And now they're starting to get results. So
this idea that funding is the problem, because we consistently rank in the bottom, we're 46, 47, depending on what study it is, in funding, and everybody points to that and says that is the problem. We're not spending enough money on these kids. You say?
I say funding matters, dollars matter, but outcomes matter more. So if we focus on moving the needle and make sure that we're properly resourcing and funding what works, but that we're stopping what doesn't work and really stopping some of the nonsense. When a district is not improving or a school's not improving and they're not making changes in leadership or inside the classroom, something's got to change.
Your decision to put your kids in private Catholic school, that was because you could not find the education you wanted in the public school?
Not true, not true.
It was just a personal choice.
Public schools in this state. I was raised Catholic. I went to Catholic schools myself. And we put our kids in the Catholic schools because they reinforce the same values that we teach at home.
Tell me about your feelings about charter schools.
Well, I'm very positive on charter schools. I'm very positive on choice and competition. I want to see, I was sat on the regional board for Teach for America, and I learned a lot there about where the real difference is, and it's the teacher inside the classroom. So I want to be supportive of all schools and all kids, but I think charters have been a net positive for this state, and I think when you see the good principals, and I could name a number of them that are doing it in traditional K-12, they need our support and focus as well.
I want to roll tape number one. I asked you this at a debate we did earlier this week at SRP. This is State School Superintendent John Huppenthal, and I asked each of the candidates, if you were governor, given the fact that he had been blogging these really disparaging remarks about minorities, about different groups, under a pseudonym, Falcon 9 was one of them, and then it got discovered it was our superintendent of public instruction. Would you pull him aside as governor and say, John, you need to step down?
Well, I'm going to give you the same answer here that I did at the debate. I'm not going to pile on John Huppenthal.
But it wouldn't be piling on, because if you pulled him aside, like you would at Cold Stone Creamery, if somebody weren't performing, you don't need to dress them down in public or in front of their coworkers. Could you not pull him aside privately if you're the governor and say, John, I think this is untenable now. How do you lead the state with this kind of baggage?
Well, I'll build a relationship with everyone that's in elective office of either party. But on this one, he will be in front of the voters 2 times, 1 time, possibly 2, in the next several weeks, and they'll get to make their decision on the actions.
Okay, let's suppose you were there right now. If you were Jan Brewer right now, would you say, I need a meeting with John because I'm going to urge him to resign?
I would talk to John. I would share with him my feelings privately. But,
which would be to urge him to step down?
Well, I would share with him my feelings privately, but this is you're talking about a hypothetical. This has happened in real time with a real elected leader, and like I said, I'm not going to pile on. There's enough of that happening.
I was surprised that more of the people in that forum, Republicans in that forum, wouldn't have stood up and said, I think to lead education, a lot of these kids are minority kids. How can they have confidence, or how can the parents have confidence if you feel that inside his heart he might be a bigot?
Well,
this stuff was really nasty stuff.
Well, the anonymous blogging thing is very surprising to me. And I'm out running for governor every day, so I haven't sat down and read exactly what was written. He'll have to be accountable for what was said. And like I said, he's going to stand in front of the voters here in 8 weeks in this primary, and he has an opponent.
So let the voters figure it out.
Well, let the voters speak on this.
Okay. I want to talk about tax policy in Arizona. Would you agree that for a long time, kind of the way we've done it in Arizona is to, because of the building industry being such a big part of our economy, that we've tried to kind of artificially keep property taxes low, and for retirees? Do you foresee, if you were the governor, that you would try to push changing our tax structure where it's a little more reliable and level and not subject to what we just went through?
Yes, I think we
have
a lot of room for improvement in our tax structure. I think this is really job one of fixing state and positioning it so the economy can really grow. I always say I want to start with a tax structure that looks like somebody actually wrote it on purpose, which is
okay, what would that look like?
Which is not what we have today. And so I was trained at Procter & Gamble when I graduated from Arizona State University, and we had something we called search and reapply. It was when you saw other good ideas in the country or the world, you can bring them back to headquarters and apply them, do it legally, ethically, and with attribution. So I look at other states that do things better than the state of Arizona.
Who would that be?
Well, one state is Texas. Texas has had 30% of the nation's economic development, job creation, and company relocation over the past decade. And Texas has a preferable tax code to us. They have no income tax. They have a lighter regulatory environment, and they have lower liability and litigation on the small businessman and the taxpayer. I want to move all 3 of those things forward from a governor's standpoint in the next year.
They have no state income tax.
They have no state income tax.
Would you go that direction?
I want to go that direction. It's aspirational. I said that I want to start where I left off. Remember in 2012 when we stopped Proposition 204?
Right.
So I said I want to lead off where I left off there. I want to begin by lowering the income tax with the goal of driving it all the way down to 0.
And lowering the income tax then, in your view, helps small business, because many of these businesses, the small business, it's the engine of a lot of stuff, they get affected by income tax.
I believe it really helps everyone because it makes the state more attractive for a company to relocate.
We seem to always be battling Austin, Texas,
and
for a lot of these good companies.
Yeah, and aren't we tired of hearing about Austin, Texas, and Rick Perry and Dallas? I mean, I think we've got a preferable place to live. And all these rooms, I'm getting everywhere all over the state, John, and I'll say, who was born somewhere other than the state of Arizona? it seems like 80% of the hands in the rooms go up. So the market is spoken. We've got a great product here in the state. So we should be having reflective economic growth, job creation. And when these companies, we don't have to talk companies into leaving California, they're leaving by the hundreds. We're already Chicago's favorite suburb here in Arizona. Companies are leaving Illinois. Let's get them to come to Arizona, and let's have the best environment for the companies that already exist here so that they can grow and thrive and reinvest. That's how you create a thriving job market.
I want you to clear something up, because I came across something that I wasn't aware of. You're a wealthy guy. When you left Cold Stone, you became a very wealthy guy, a multimillionaire. Safe to say?
Well, it was a positive event. Now, I wasn't born wealthy.
No, I know. You're a Toledo, Ohio guy.
Yes.
You came from a...
Came from Toledo, Ohio, product of the Midwest. My dad was a cop, but yes, Cold Stone
was a cop.
Yes.
So you weren't in a privileged environment growing up. You're a self-made guy.
Well, those aren't the words that I would use. I mean, I think all of us drink water from wells we didn't drink. So I think I had a lot of help and support and loving parents along the way and a good education.
Here's what I wanted to ask, and I want to give you a chance to clear it up. This report that I read, I was stunned. You were late paying taxes in 06, 08, 09. How did that happen with a guy who's so wealthy?
Well, we had a piece of property in which we didn't live. The taxes were late, and this came up in the last election cycle.
Right.
And I said, hey, we made a mistake. I made a mistake. It won't happen again. We had someone that was paying the bills that just paid them late. So the taxes were late. They're paid in full, and it hasn't happened again. It won't happen again in the future.
So it's not any, do you feel any need to clear it up, or do you feel like you already cleared it up in the last cycle?
Well, this came up in the last election. We cleared it up, and the voters decided, and in 2010, I was elected to treasurer.
Right.
And like I said, this won't happen again, and it hasn't.
What's the greatest accomplishment you think you've done as state treasurer? Because that was your first elected office after coming out of the private sector. What would it be?
Well, I would think the state's permanent land endowment trust fund is at an all-time record high. We conducted the first ever asset allocation study in the Treasurer's office. So the Treasurer's really the state's responsible banker and chief investment officer.
And the endowment fund is for education.
The endowment
This is
fund,
why it's important.
It's very important. So I think by any measure of good management, total state assets are growing faster and in much better condition than they were 4 years ago. Part of that is how we've invested the funds, how we've diversified them, and the new asset classes that we've brought in. So I'm proud of that, but I'm also proud of Proposition 118, which we passed at the ballot box, which put more money into K-12 education without raising taxes and without any additional general fund spending. And then also, outside of my role as treasurer, I stepped forward to stop Proposition 204, which was a $1 billion permanent sales tax increase that would have made the state of Arizona the second highest sales tax state in the nation. And I think this will leave room for our economy to grow and for us to actually reform our tax code and to reform K-12
Well,
education.
I've got you here and you're wearing two hats. You're running for governor, obviously, but you're the state treasurer. Revenues are starting to pick up, right?
Yes.
How dramatically?
Well, slower than we'd like. I mean,
Slower than we projected?
slower than we projected, yes.
So the legislature's got to really watch how they're spending very carefully.
Absolutely. Caution has got to be the watchword. But if you go back to December of 2009, we were bankrupt, insolvent, structurally broken as a state. Today, when I left the treasurer's office, we have $2.3 billion cash in that checking account. $450 million plus in that reserve account. So we're on
the rainy day fund account?
Yes, rainy day account.
Let me ask you about that. Now, since you are right in the middle of what the numbers are, you know them, you've lived them, how does that shape how you govern as a governor if you were to be elected?
Well, because I came into office in 2010 and have seen what Governor Brewer has been through and the tough choices she's had to make, she really came in at a time of real financial crisis. The next governor, because of her hard work, comes in at a time of real opportunity. So I do think we need to be cautious and we need to look at the budget and understand, why is government here and what is it here to do and how do we do it well? What I've said is I've built a company, now I'd like to shrink a government and grow an economy.
We're going to take a break. Doug Ducey, state treasurer and candidate, Republican candidate for governor, back in a moment, continue our conversation. Back with State Treasurer Doug Ducey. You've seen him on the campaign ads. You know this guy from Cold Stone Creamery, probably. He was one of the principal architects to build that company into, what, 1,400 franchises
and
around the
going
country.
strong, yes. A lot of good Arizonans built that company, and a lot of good Arizonans run that company today.
The first campaign ad that we saw, you started in on President Obama. You said you would stand up to the Obama administration. I have to admit, there were some eyes rolling in the studio when this came on. Because people thought, well, wait a minute, this is a governor. He's not running against President Obama. What's this all about?
Well, I think too often President Obama is trying to be governor of our state. I mean, I want to get Arizona out from under the thumb of the federal government. I believe in federalism, I believe in states' rights, and I think if we could have our dollars here in the state of Arizona and create the state that we want, we would be a much better state. So that ad was to lay that out and to say this is the direction we're going to go. We're going to have a governor that leads, and the vision of the campaign is really an Arizona that leads the nation in economic development and job creation.
I interviewed Fife Symington about 2 months ago, and he endorsed you.
Yes.
During that interview.
Very proud of that endorsement.
I sense that if people were looking to the past in Arizona as to what kind of governor you would be, is that your guy?
I would welcome that analogy at any time. I think in the modern era, Governor Symington has been the most consequential governor in Arizona. Governor Brewer has been very consequential as well. But what Governor Symington did in terms of kickstarting our economy, in terms of laying the groundwork for improving our K-12 system, is a model that I'd like to stand on the shoulders of, in addition to the financial condition that Governor Brewer's left us in. Let
me just roll down a couple of these and get your take on it. SB 1070. Was it necessary, and would you have gone that route?
I was supportive of SB 1070 when the governor passed it. I think the issue crystallized what was happening in this state and nationalized it for our Congress. Nothing's happened since, but this is a real issue in this state, and border security is something the next governor is going to have to deal with.
During that same interview with Fife Symington, we talked about 1062, Senate Bill 1062, and he said, I used to call them loons in the lake. Every now and then, he said, you can expect it out of every legislature, these weird bills pop up. He says they're really just distractions. They don't mean anything, and you veto them, and they're gone. Did the governor wait too long to veto that bill?
Well, I was supportive of the governor's action there, and I think she was out of town. She came back, and she took swift action.
But we got beat up in the process, and this is kind of my overarching question. The image of Arizona. You get outside of Arizona, and you hear a lot of crazy stuff. People think we're kind of nuts here. That bothers me as an Arizonan, because I know we're not. I really believe that in my heart, having lived here a long time. You have too.
Well, of course we're not.
How do you repair that? We've got an image issue that needs a little work.
Well, I think the next governor gets a fresh start to set a new tone. And just think of what's going to happen. The next governor is going to be sworn in January of 2015. We're going to kick off the year with the Fiesta Bowl. Hopefully, we're going to have a couple of Cardinals home playoff games.
So there'll be some momentum.
A week later, we've got the Pro Bowl, we've got Barrett-Jackson Auto Show, we've got the FBR Open, and on that Sunday, the eyes of the world will be looking at Arizona as we kick off the Super Bowl. And let's present out who we are as a state and as a people, and we get an opportunity to hit the refresh button for who we are.
Okay, then conversely, what about a kid who, let's say his parents immigrated here legally or illegally, and he's in school in Central Phoenix trying to make it happen? What about that kid?
Well, I'm running to be governor of all the people. And if I think Arizona stands for any one single idea, John, it's opportunity for all. Good jobs and a chance to get ahead. At the same time, we have these very real issues of what's happening at the border and with immigration. So I do believe we're a nation of immigrants, but we're also a nation of laws.
Your kids, as we pointed out, you're obviously a successful, wealthy guy. Your kids are working, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
Tell me about the paycheck from McDonald's that one of your sons got and what you were trying to impart upon him about how this country works.
Well, I just think you learn a lot from work. I mean, I think you learn a lot from your parents and your coaches and your teachers, but you also learn a lot from work. My boys have all been busy. They're all very active athletes. But this summer, my oldest son had more time on his hands than he had in previous summers, so it was time to get a job. So he's working at McDonald's behind the counter. My first job was as a busboy at Bob Evans in Toledo, Ohio. And I think you learn a lot.
I bet Jude LaCava would know it because he worked there.
Great
he was
place.
in radio there.
Great place. We still, when we go back home in the summer, back to see my dad, we always eat breakfast there.
But when he got his first check, his paycheck,
yes,
you kind of broke it down for him, and what were you trying to tell him?
Well, one, I thought it was for him a significant amount of money because he doesn't have a lot of cash in his pocket. But two, I wanted him to see where his money went and what went to taxes and what went to him for the hours that he put in. He's had a good attitude, but I can't say that he's that happy to be working versus playing sports.
How did he feel about the taxes coming out of his check?
Well, I think he saw it as more educational, and he thought it might have been a bit much.
And I sense you feel that way too, right? The way we're taxed.
Well, I would like to see people be able to keep more of their hard-earned dollars. I really believe that, especially people that are trying to climb the economic ladder. I mean, here we've got a kid who's at home living with his parents who's getting a job so he can help chip in on insurance and gas money. But people that are trying to climb the economic ladder, I want to see them have more money in their paycheck. That's why I'm talking about restructuring taxes, and that's why I'm talking about growing this economy. Okay. It's so that all can rise.
We're going to take a quick break. Doug Ducey, State Treasurer and Republican candidate for governor, our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. Back in a minute. Back on Newsmaker Sunday with State Treasurer Doug Ducey, candidate for governor of Arizona, Republican candidate, the primary coming up here in August. I want to roll tape number 2. I want to get your take on what's happening in Nogales. All of these kids from Central America coming here. As governor, what would you do about this? Is there anything the governor can do?
Well, I believe there are things that the governor can do, and we've been outspoken on this even from our candidacy of what is happening here with the incompetence of Barack Obama and our federal government. They are literally shipping people from Texas to Arizona in 108-degree heat with no communication to our state authorities. They're dropping these people off at bus stations in Tucson and Phoenix. Many of them are women and children. So in addition to the incompetence, we've got the inhumanity of it. And then what about the legality of it? I mean, I've got a 10-year-old son.
Could you try to figure out a way to ship people back, or could you try to stop them at the border with the National Guard, the state police? What do you do?
Well, I've said you can activate the National Guard, but what you would want to do, I think, is move them to the facilities where these people are being kept right now to relieve the border agents. Let's put the border agents back on the border where they belong. Let's bring in Catholic Social Services, Salvation Army, American Red Cross to clothe, feed, and bathe these people, but to identify them so they can be reunited with their families and return to their country of origin. I think that would be the American way to handle this.
Would you have accepted the Medicaid expansion for the federal government if you were governor?
I'm 100% against Obamacare, and I couldn't be more clear about that. But I think the governor and the legislature have done what they've done. The facts have changed since they've done that. They did it
to save the budget.
And
it was a money
deal.
deal.
We've got this guarantee from the federal government, and I never will forget what Ronald Reagan said about being careful about getting in bed with the federal government. Sometimes you get a little something more than just a good night's sleep. So in 3 years, the rules are going to change here, and what I'll want to see is real reform on how we handle health care, and what I'll do in the interim is be 100% vigilant on protecting Arizona's budget.
30 seconds left. From the heart, what is it that drives you in this, and what do you want to accomplish?
Well, I come from the private sector. Like I said, I built a business. Now I want to shrink a government and grow an economy. I really think if people look at what I did with Cold Stone Creamery, what I've done in the Treasurer's office in managing $12.5 billion and the experience I have there, and most importantly, what my plan is for growing our economy, for fixing our system of education, and being a state of opportunity for all. And they can find out that specific plan at DougDucey.com, at Doug Ducey on Twitter, or Doug Ducey on Facebook, and then make a choice, because this is the first open seat for governor we've had in Arizona in the last 12 years, and I'd like to be your next governor.
Good to see you.
Thank you, John.
Doug Ducey, our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. We'll see you next week. Early voting starts July 31st.